Hey guys, how are you doing today? I hope everybody is doing really well. I wanted to start out by looking at all of the gear that we received from the college, if you guys borrowed gear. We're gonna get hands-on with our cameras, so take a moment, pause the video if you need to, go grab your gear, and let's look at every item together. The school's camera kit consists of a Canon EOS Rebel T5. The lens is an 18 to 55 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6. Although your camera may not be an exact replica to what the school uses, many of the features are universal, even between Canon and Nikon, or they can be easily comparable. I actually want you guys to, before we do anything, we're going to flip the camera over. We're going to look at the bottom side of our camera. The battery at the bottom, we click that open, there's a gray button there where you can pull your battery out. Always make sure if you're taking out the battery or the card to make sure your camera is off, okay? That is the same rule that we also want to do if we take off our lens from the camera. So to take off our lens, we want to press this button here on the, if we're looking straight at the camera, right under where it says the Rebel T5. We're going to press that button and turn your lens counterclockwise. All right, so now we have the two pieces apart from each other. Never, ever, ever store your camera like this, completely open and exposed to all of the elements. When we're putting our lens back on to the camera, if you are having a struggle or a difficult time and you're jamming it on, just stop, take a deep breath, and slowly put that back on there. You're going to look for the white square that is on your lens, and you're going to line it up with the white square that is on the rim of the camera, and you line those two boxes up, and it should, like, very gently right back into place. All right, when we look straight down at our camera, there is a button that looks a little bit like a lightning bolt. If everybody were to press that right now, this flash pops up here. What I want to say about this flash, we're going to get really serious for a second. This flash is the worst addition ever added to a camera ever. The only light that this flash is going to provide is going to be very harsh. It could cause red eye for sure. It's definitely just not a good flash to use. So if you're ever shooting and all of a sudden this pops up, but you don't know why, because there is a feature on here where it could happen, but this pops up, I don't know why, I'm gonna just keep shooting anyway, just don't do that. Stop immediately. Put that back down. It's really easy for me to tell if you have, so don't do it. First part of the camera that I want to highlight is the trigger. If you push the trigger down halfway, it will focus on your subject. If you push it down all the way, it will take an exposure. The next button is the main dial. We're going to use that later, but it'll allow us to change our shutter speed and aperture. Next, we have the mode dial. This we're going to use in a way that you may not have used before. All the letters that are mentioned there, M, AV, TV, and P, they are going to be the functions that we use. We will no longer use the pictures on the other side of that dial. Next, we have the hot shoe. This is going to be something that we would put an external flash onto our camera. It's not the flash that pops up that I mentioned earlier, but again, an external one. We use this flash in our advanced class. Next, we can see the MF and AF switch if we look over onto our lens. That is manual focus and autofocus. The camera should be in autofocus most of the time when we're shooting. There are particular cases when we would want to use manual focus. Those times might be when we're shooting astrophotography or when we are very close to our subject and we want to grab a particular focus on it. When we are in manual focus, we would want to use the dial at the very tip of our lens in order to fine-tune that focus. The first button that I want to introduce you to is live view mode. I really recommend not using this mode. What it does is it causes an extremely long delay when focusing on a subject, so it slows down your entire process. You may want to use it for astral photography, but that would be later down the road. Next is our aperture exposure compensation button. You would use exposure compensation if you were in some type of a program mode. You could also use this button as your aperture toggle. It switches your dials between shutter speed and aperture, but that will be used later. Next is the ISO button. We will be using this button later, so I just want to identify it and its location.
Next is the autofocus button. You have three options here, the first one being one shot. I would use that in the beginning of this class. It has that chirp in between each time the camera focuses and locks onto a subject. AI servo is when the subject is continuously tracked and focused on and it never locks. AI focus is when it is continuously tracking the subject but then locks focus. If the subject moves again, then it's supposed to track again. I've always read that it is not recommended to use AI focus, ever. Next we have the white balance button. I would recommend keeping this button on auto. You can play around with it if you wish, but we don't specifically go into white balance in this class. Here we have the motor drive and self timer button. You can choose here from single shooting to continuous shooting, and then there are a bunch of timers after that. Single shooting is just one shot, and then you have to press the trigger down again in order for it to release. Then we have continuous shooting. When you press that, it will take multiple exposures as you hold the trigger down. Next we have the timers. Timers are good for if you didn't have a tripod and you wanted to stabilize your camera. Also, of course, if you wanted to take a selfie and get into a group shot or something like that, that could help you with the timer. These are the important buttons that we're going to be using during this class. I haven't mentioned a couple. Some of them are pretty obvious, but others, you can look those up in the camera manual. I will also link that in Canvas so that you guys could have access. Next we have a remote trigger or a intervalometer. These will help us to take photographs without having to press the actual camera trigger. And as you can see here, you just plug it into the side of the camera and get rolling with it.
All right, next we have our tripod. What I definitely would recommend when it comes to tripods is don't buy a tripod from Walmart. Even if it's like a $50 tripod and you're like, oh, 50 bucks from Walmart, it's gonna be fine. No, they're very plasticky, they're not very stable, secure, sturdy at all. It's really a waste of money. One brand that I would definitely recommend any tripod in would be Manfrotto, M-A-N-F-R-O-T-T-O. They're pretty much an industry standard when it comes to tripods. They're just pretty legit and well made. But if we look at our tripod and what we can do with it, we need to open up our leg. And we can open up all of the joints. When you do open them up, make sure you lock down. If we look at this particular tripod, with the camera and where it is at, it doesn't have a majorly wide footprint. And what I mean by that is the distance between all of these legs at the bottom and where they are on the ground. The wider it is, the more stable the tripod's gonna be. I mean, so this one, I mean, it's not terrible, but they definitely have better ones. So a wider footprint is really important. Tightening down this plate is super important. If we tighten it down halfway and it's jiggling around, that's not doing anything. If I put this on the camera or on the tripod, let's do it. And I'm like, oh, I got it. Like the wind comes by and it's shaking the camera, right? Anything can shake it or move it. It's certainly not what we want. All right, so we have all of our items. We know how to use them. Check out the quiz that we have on some of the parts of the camera, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.